Hello, and welcome to Message in the Middle with Marianne. We all know that life is hard, right? It's messy, it's unpredictable, but it can be wonderful all at the same time. My hope is that we can take a deep dive into self-development topics and explore life's lessons through book clubs, conversations, and interviews. And together, we can uncover the lessons that others have already learned to help us navigate this crazy, wonderful ride called life. Hello and welcome to Message in the Middle. I'm your host, Marianne, and joining me today is Amy Goober. Amy is an action coach, empowering women to connect, move forward, and put themselves in the driver's seat of their own lives. Amy, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I can't think of a more appropriate podcast focus for me than this one. So thanks for inviting me.
I love that. And before we get into it, I have to say big shout out to our common acquaintance, Jenny Belanger. Mm-hmm. She's not only a magician with websites, but also with connections. So I have to thank her for getting us together. It was a great connection. So let's level set just right out the gate. What exactly is an action coach for people that haven't heard of it? And how does someone just find themselves in that seat?
That's a great question. So I like to let people know that if they don't know what an action coach is, that makes perfect sense because I made it up. I have a whole long previous history of different entrepreneurial pursuits. But when I was turning 60, which was 5 years ago, I found that not only was I turning 60, but my youngest child was also leaving for college. So in the same month, and I realized I was working, I had a full-time gig as a health coach for a big nationwide company, and I had teams and I'd grown. I had great success there and coached like 700 people over 6 or 7 years. So, I mean, I was full in it and it was kind of full-time. But as I approached the time when my daughter was leaving for college and she was going nearby, I just thought I have to really engross myself in something new so that I'm not on top of her. And I said to myself, I'm 60, like, what am I waiting for? The time has gone for like, I'll do it then. I'll do it. So I looked around and thought about what do I really want to do? Right?
Yeah.
Older daughter at that point was 27 and saying to me, who do you want to serve? And what is Amy Goober going to do? Right? It always takes the adult children to kind of nudge us. So I realized I wanted to serve women, and I looked around and I found that not just professionally, but personally, there were a lot of women saying a lot of things they wanted to do that they just weren't doing.
Yeah.
Everybody has something.
Yeah.
And I feel like as women, we are naturally other-oriented. It is easier for us to care about our parents, our children, our friends, our neighbors, the cashier at Market Basket. I mean, anybody else but us. And it's harder for women in general to turn the focus back onto ourselves. So that's how I got the idea of action coach. And I have done many things in my life. And many people have said, I can't believe everything you do and you really get things done. And I thought, okay, then I'm a good role model.
Yeah.
And I wanted to create something that women could learn the steps it takes to get into action instead of just having somebody nudge them along. So at that time, I created my Drive Your Life program, which is exactly what that is. It's a small group virtual coaching program. And I created a 5-step process to teach women how to get into action. And I still run it. I run it every September. But the point being, I wanted the women to be doing the do during the course. Because I had taken many, many small group coaching courses, and I ended up with a fat notebook of notes, and then I put it away. And I was like, what did I concretely get from that? So the women in my group and my program start, at 0 and end up at 100 in terms of something they want to accomplish.
I love that. And that is so common to walk into a seminar or a, coaching group, whatever it is, and to think, wow, you get so inspired and you have all this information and you write down all these notes and then you walk away and get busy with life and it doesn't happen. So I really love you picking up on that niche. And kudos to your daughter for asking those questions, right?
She's now 32, but she's amazing. And she really, sort of like finger in the face, kind of like, what is Amy Goober going to do? Like, Mom, what are you going to do? I'm like, and she was right. And I had to think about it. And then I sort of gradually moved away from the health coaching and I was doing both for a while because I think, your heart and your brain tell you when you're doing two things, which one you want.
Yeah.
And so that's what I did. So that was 5 years ago.
It's so interesting, though, because I think you mentioned that women are mostly other oriented, and I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't agree more. I think we're groomed from the time we're just little kids, right, to
Mm-hmm.
be other oriented. But I also think that with that comes our loss of ourselves, loss of, we lose so many. I hear story after story after story of so many women that have lost the who they wanted to be or what they loved to do. And so when your daughter asked you that questions, I find it a little bit ironic that you had to stop, because it's just human. You had to stop and go, well, what do I really want? Because I think we get caught up in whatever we're doing and we sometimes lose track of that. So it's a good reminder that you sort of have to do that self-check. You have to do that self-check a lot.
Absolutely. And also, just like a quick exercise for listeners, is I find that a lot of the women I work with have forgotten what they like.
Yes.
They don't even know what they want. And I'm not even talking big. I'm saying they have stopped asking themselves what they want. So, like, if, even myself, if I'm going to go out to dinner with my husband and he says, where do you want to go? What do I say? Where do you want to go? Where do you want to go? I know where I want to go or where I don't want to go, but I always defer initially.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I have the women that I work with do when they get to that point that you just mentioned, where we've sort of gotten, like, we've lost the knack of knowing what we like. So I have them make two columns: I like and I don't like. Either they do it on their phone or they, if you're, pen and paper, which I am, you do it that way. And you just hang on to it for like a couple days or a week. And it's anything. You put anything down. You try to flex that muscle. It could be, I like pizza. I don't like chicken. I like pink. I don't like green,
Yeah.
right? I like the morning. I don't like nighttime. Well, whatever. Little things. It doesn't have to be big life-changing things. Always start small. And they start to get into the habit of thinking about what they like. I like this sweater. I don't like this jacket. On and on and on it goes in their day-to-day life. And it's a great little exercise to do to just get used to finding out what do you like and what don't you like.
Yeah,
and it could even be people.
Flex that muscle.
But I like Aunt June. I don't like my neighbor, whoever. Right?
Yeah. Yes. It gets you flexing that muscle. And I think it's so interesting that typically, I don't know if you've seen this, but I've seen this. The I don't like column is so much easier to fill.
Yeah.
We do know, and we're more in touch with what we don't like, I think, than we are with what we do for a lot of things. But I like the idea of just starting with little things like, colors or flavors or people, whatever.
Start asking yourself, what do I like?
Yeah. Wow. So you've reinvented yourself a lot of times. You talked about the wellness coaching. You alluded to other things. So I know your history. You had a bakery that you started before children and kind of ramped that up and then sold it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So it's not a surprise to me that you're continuing to reinvent yourself. This is something you've done your whole life. But starting a business in your 60s, I mean, that's scary. So what do you say to people that are in their late 50s, they're in their early 60s, and they're maybe just getting out of the field that they were in for most of their career, and they're thinking they want to do something, but it's probably too late. Like, what do you say to that?
Do it.
Just do it. Yeah.
Well, I really think that I learned this valuable lesson, this great story. I'll really try to summarize it. I had two children, a girl and 3 years later, a boy. And I was older when I started out. I was 33 and 36 when I had them, and we were done. We were done. And all of a sudden, I said to myself, oh my God, I might not be done having children. And in my family, my husband's family, it was two, everybody had two, right. So anyway, long story short, I was getting older and I am a researcher, and I decided that I was 40. So and I'm going back 25 years.
Yeah.
So 40 now having a baby is very different than 25 years ago. 40 was like ancient. Anyway, long story short, I found an OBGYN at high risk, and I got this guy on the phone. I don't even know how he called me back. I wasn't a patient. And I told him my whole story of how my two first kids would be so much older because my youngest was 4 already, and I wasn't even trying to get pregnant. So I knew. And all these things in advanced maternal age, all these things. And he said something to me that I'm going to tell you that I hope to never forget, which is, he said, the things in life we regret are the things we don't do.
Yeah.
He listened to my whole spiel, my whole long vent about all this. And he said, it's the things we don't do are the things we regret. So that's what I would say to somebody who says, is it too late? What should I do? I mean, I certainly would advise and guide that person if they wanted me to, of how to do it in terms of don't do big risk early on, all these things. There's lots of ways to do things that don't feel scary.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is, why not do it? And if not now, when?
If not now, when? Yeah. I also think trying to get rid of the scariness is not necessarily a great thing. I mean, I'm one that really feels strongly that we have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. Totally. And the magic happens just outside of that, right? Just on the cusp of pushing those boundaries is when you're growing, you're starting to push into something different. So
I love that. I say that all the time. I agree. We're in alignment.
I knew that when we talked. I just, I think it's getting people to get there, right? Those first times, it's exercising that muscle because it is scary at first. I've heard you say that you like to help women kind of realize what they already have inside. Mm-hmm. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Yeah. So that actually ironically comes back to what I was saying at the beginning about the Drive Your Life program. That's one of the elements that we spend one of our weeks on. So I think as we get older, we forget what we have inside. And women in general are not overly praised, right? They don't pat themselves on the back, nor do they really lift each other up. It's unusual, So we go through life kind of struggling along and thinking, well, I could be thinner, I could be wealthier, I could be promoted faster. We're always thinking of what we could be moving forward, and we very often forget what we have inside. So my theory is that the traits you had as a younger person, you still have inside. They don't come in the middle of the night and slurp your traits out, so, but we forget. So a quick example is one of the women in my Drive Your Life program. It's just a really good example. It was midlife, right? And she wasn't working, and she had moved to a new state, and she wanted to create community. But what her biggest passion was gardening. And gardening is a solo pursuit, right? You garden in your garden, and she gardens in her garden, and Mary over there gardens in her. So she was trying to figure out how to create community. And I said, I think you should create a Facebook group for gardening in the Lakes region of New Hampshire, which is where she was. Yeah. And she just said, oh my God, I have no idea how to do that. I mean, I know you can do it, Amy, but I mean, I don't think I can do it. How am I going to do it? I don't know how to do it. It was the whole thing. She had this huge block. And then we did this whole exercise where you look back to see what are the things you've accomplished in your life, not just your work resume, but maybe you moved, maybe you're a single parent, maybe you had to help a friend through a difficult time, whatever. That's traits. Yeah. There were traits in there that got you through. So we go through this whole thing, and she remembered going through the exercise that she had been the president of the PTO, when her kids were in elementary school. I was like, oh my God, what are the traits you needed for that? And she goes, listen. And I said, okay, so guess what? She has 1,000 members now in this crazy big Facebook group that she created, all this community. And now she does in-person events. And, and I think if she was sitting here, she would say, because I realized that I had done things like this before and I could do it again.
Yeah.
And I was nervous, but I did it anyway.
I love that. I can relate, because I also think that sometimes we have a hard time seeing how our skills are portable and how they stand up somewhere else. I can relate to that. I did that to myself for years and years and years. And really, when you boil it back and you really take the industry out of it, or whatever it was you were doing, the specific thing, to your point, those skills, they can go anywhere and they can fit anything. You just have to realize that. I think sometimes she probably thought,
Yeah.
oh, well, I'm good at PTA, but she didn't think about the actual, well, I'm good at organizing. I'm good at communication. I'm good at, right, all those things. So
Mhm.
I think that's a really great reminder, because I do think, as somebody who's gone through that and sort of been blocked by that, I get it. I get how you can sort of get tied up in the what it's tied to instead of the actual skill. Yeah, that's pretty cool. So you get these groups of women together in this seminar,
Well, the Drive Your Life is a
the program.
program. It's a small group coaching program. Yes. We
Okay.
do that once a year. So that's a group that, each that's always new. Although sometimes they repeat if they want to like have another, they have like another goal. But I'm teaching them the steps. But the support of the group is really helpful. But they know the steps. When they leave the program, they know the steps, but they love the support of the group. So
Yeah.
some do come back. Yes. Yeah.
So, I mean, well, that's ideal that they can step away, but we'll talk about the bringing them back too in a minute. But I want to ask you, from your experience of what you've seen doing these things every fall, why do you think so many women struggle with taking those steps? What do you think the big blockers are?
I think it's what we said at the beginning. I think that they are very other oriented. So they say, I want to lose weight, or they say, I want to start volunteering, or they say, I want to clean out my basement, or they say, I want a new job, or they say, I wish I got along better with my daughter-in-law. Like a wide variety of things. And they say it and say it and say it and say it, and they don't do anything about it. And I think it's because either it's hard and they don't want to do it because it's hard, and all those things I mentioned are hard,
Yeah.
or they don't have the guidance to break it into steps and to learn how to get going,
Yeah.
or they don't have the accountability, which is part of a group, right? Or a coach is the accountability,
Yeah.
or they just shove it off
Yeah.
because they get busy with the day to day.
Yeah.
But what they learn when they start to do any of those things is they can do
Yeah.
it, and they feel energized by it. And once you clean out your junk drawer, you can clean out your closet.
Yes.
Right? And once you've cleaned out your closet, you can clean out your basement. And once you've cleaned out your basement, you can walk 3 times a week and lose 10 pounds. And then once you do that, you can make new friends. And then so it is, we do need to build our confidence. And I think particularly in terms of connections, which is my biggest focus in everything I do, is connecting women with each other, is I think we're rusty. We get rusty, right? When you're in school, you're surrounded by your peers. If you went to college, let's just say, you're surrounded by your peers. If you start a new job, at least in the era that I started working in, you were in the office.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even
now you have support of other people that you're working with, but yeah.
Yeah. So, and then you get rusty. And then your kids are going through school and you're around the parents. So you're surrounded. Then all of a sudden, you're not surrounded by anybody anymore. And we get rusty. It's harder to make new friends. It's harder to strike up a conversation. It's harder to say, do you want to go to coffee? So when I do my Better Together event, which I know we talked about before this recording, I usually give them like a few minutes, and I give them some strategies of what to say after hello. And I'll like put the timer on for 5 minutes and have them pair up. And we're talking like a room of 100 women. It gets very loud. And they get practice because we're out of practice. That's all.
100%. 100%. And I will say, if you're an introvert, it's just harder in general to take those steps. Mm-hmm. I think it's easier if somebody comes up to you, or to your point, if you're part of something, if you're at work and you have to talk to somebody totally different than sitting in a room with a bunch of strangers and just going up to somebody.
Okay.
Yeah. Interesting. Talk to us a little bit about those events, since we're talking about it. Tell us how it works.
Yeah. So I had run a virtual program during COVID for sort of empty nesters, midlife women. And I brought in experts on Zoom. And it was so well received, right? Because we were home. It was so well received. And I did it a few times. And then at the beginning of, I think, or the end of 2022 or beginning of 2023, I was like, why aren't I doing this in person?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I started running these events in person. So it's called Better Together. There's no age mentioned. There's no nothing mentioned, but it's a lot of midlife women, for the most part, although I had a 37-year-old in November that I've made such a great connection with. And I just like that excited me that,
Fabulous.
the bench is widening.
Yeah.
But we end up having about 100 women in the room, and the focus is first connections, then learning, and then supporting women-owned businesses. So the learning part is I bring in women experts in all these different topics, and they speak for 20 or 30 minutes. So it's very like bing, 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 bing. There's no lecturing. It's nothing like that. It's a presentation, interactive. And it might be like a functional medicine doctor talking about hormones, right? Or it might be someone talking about interior design. Or it could be someone talking about skincare. It could be someone talking about, how to budget your finances, retirement, whatever. So it's really varied. And we do a lunch together, and we sit theater style. So we're all like right up against each other, really close. And it's just what they say. It's hard for me to tell, to be honest, because I'm in the middle of it. But they say the energy is unbelievable. And it's a day that somebody can go to just for herself.
Yes.
And that's what we're lacking.
Yes.
That's what we're lacking. Nope, sorry, I can't do the laundry. I can't go food shopping. I can't meet you for this. I'm going to Better Together.
I love that.
And the speakers and the sponsors are all top-notch women entrepreneurs. So they get to showcase their expertise.
Love that.
And we learn from them, and they get to interact with the women that attend.
Well, I'm sure it's inspiring. And I mean, one of the things that I've stressed in so many conversations here is community. And I am sure, you tell me if I'm wrong, but how many of those people keep in touch with each other? How many of those people, maybe not all 100 connect with 100, but how many of them have made a lasting connection with one or two people in that group?
Right.
That they then can take forward and either build a friendship or help each other as they grow into whatever it is they're working on. I bet a ton of them, right?
Right. And usually women sign up alone. So they walk in, alone, but they don't leave alone. And I always sort of challenge them to get people's phone numbers and text them and, connect. And then sometimes people come back because it's different every single time. So then they recognize each other. Oh, you were here in November, or you were here back in April. So it's the next one in April will be the 5th one that I've done. So I've been doing it for like, I do 2 a year. So it's 2.5 years of doing it. And it grows community. But I think it also, sharpens our skills, connecting. To me, it's just a great take, which I try to create it to be a great take. Like I zhuzh the whole thing up all the time. We're doing like a cocktail and charcuterie class as an add-on at the end. So people can mingle and get to know each other. And those two sponsors can really show everything they've got. So, I'm always trying, we have a comedian coming. Like I'm always trying to like jazz it up a little bit to make it different than the one before and just to make it like a memorable day.
I love that you're trying to build that community and those connections, and people will learn, people will get inspired. But I got to tell you, like, I'm just thinking back, and I mentioned this to you when we had a pre-call. I went to PodFest for the first time this year, and there were some great speakers and there was some great information. But to be totally honest, that wasn't the best part. The best part were the connections. The best part was the community that you felt. And, it validates what you're doing, the things you're feeling, who you are, all the things right? That we sometimes struggle with alone and don't talk about, even to our best girlfriends. Sometimes we don't talk about them. But when you go to something like this, it gives you the ability to sort of open that channel. Yeah. And it really is, it's such a big thing. It really can move the needle for you. It really can.
It really can. And I think I spoke to somebody recently who was not happy in her job. And she said, I can't wait to go in April because I know I'm going to be inspired. I know, that your April event, you've got all those entrepreneurs, and I know something is going to catch and it's going to lead me to my next thing. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so great. So.
Yeah, that's got to make you feel good. That's fantastic. I'm curious. So you've been putting on these events. You've been an entrepreneur yourself forever. What's the best piece of advice you ever got?
Well, I don't know if it's like a piece of advice, but I think I think it's what we said earlier, which is you just have to do it. You can plan and 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 come up with all these things. And if you don't do anything, it's a plan. So I think, again, it all comes back to confidence, right? And I think a lot of midlife women, all of us, lose confidence in one area or another.
Yes.
Right. But I had the benefit of, I had started my first business at 26, which next year will be 40 years ago. So as you said, a long time ago. And then I was kind of too sort of naive to know that what I was doing was like
kind of crazy back then. Yeah.
Crazy. Yeah. But I had an uncle, and my father had died. He was an entrepreneur, but he died when I was 15. But I had this wonderful uncle named Uncle Ben. And he, I would talk to him about all of this because I was working in an advertising agency, and I left like a job where I was advancing to go open this cake bakery. And, and he helped me and everything. But I think the net of it was, are you not going to do it? And this would be a totally different conversation you and I would be having right now if I even were here.
Yeah.
If I didn't do that. Because I really believe, and this is what I'm going to talk about here's a spoiler alert, in April, is that life is a game board. And, you're on this square, but you might be going left, you might be going right. It might be chutes and ladders. You might be going up, you might be going down, but you don't have to know where you're going to wind up. You just need to know where you are. And luckily I had the stuff, the inner stuff, or the naivete or whatever, what have you, to make that happen. And once I did that, then I spent like 20 years not as an entrepreneur. I was raising my family. I was a stay-at-home mom, and I did I call them pursuits. I wasn't making any money from them, but like raised money for all the playgrounds in my town. I did a lot of things.
You were still working.
I was working without being paid. So, yeah. But I had that basis, but I would say to other people that don't have that and haven't done that, all the more reason to go do something.
Yeah. I want to call out something that you said, because I think it gets lost a lot. And it's that not being tied to the outcome. I love your game board reference. Mm-hmm. And when I think of a typical game board, there's spinners and dice and cards and all the things, and all kinds of things can happen, right? You could we can have a path. It's a clear path, but then you might pick up a card or spin the thing or whatever and get these rules that send you somewhere else. Mm-hmm. I, for the longest time, was somebody, typical A personality, had to plan everything to the nth degree, had to know all the things. And I wanted to know the end. I wanted to know where I was going. And I worked really hard on that. And I know that's hard for a lot of people, but if you can just get yourself to a point where you can be open to wherever something takes you, the podcast taught me this. Just take the step, just start and let it go where it goes. Okay. Such a huge lesson.
That's true.
Yeah.
Right.
Such a huge lesson. Hard to do. Simple, but hard to do. You have to get in the practice.
If it wasn't hard, we'd all be doing it. I'm not running a podcast. I know it's hard. You're doing the hard stuff. Easy is going to the supermarket.
Yeah.
So it's a great lesson for people to know that I love what you said, and I say it all the time, get comfortable being uncomfortable. That's like a phrase I use very often, but it's also just about challenging yourself.
Yeah.
Easy is sitting in your house watching TV. I happen to love television. I watch a lot of it. So I'm not dissing it at all, but that's easy. That's like the easiest thing I do in my day is watch TV. I'm just receiving, So that's easy. Anything else is a little more challenging, and we need to challenge ourselves. We just absolutely have to get out, increase our reach. We just have to.
Yeah. Push yourself. Just push yourself. Somebody said to me once that if we're not changing, we're the only thing, because everything around us is always changing. So why wouldn't we? Why wouldn't we push ourselves to continue to change? Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a good practice to get into, especially in midlife and beyond. We do start to have more time to ourselves, right? So it's a great time to dig back in. Awesome. Well, this has been a fabulous conversation. Is there anything we didn't hit on that you want to hit on?
I'd love to mention the book.
I would love to hear about the book.
Yeah, time.
Yes, ma'am. Tell us about the book.
Yeah, so I just wrote, and it's coming out in a few weeks, but by the time this comes out, it'll probably be out, a book with my 93-year-old mother
Oh my gosh.
called My Mother Always Says, 25 Lessons for Finding the Silver Lining. So it's memoir and self-help combined. So it's a memoir of her. She was born in 1931, right? And we're in 2025, like, almost 100 years ago, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And her life going through the Great Depression and 10 years old during World War II and going through the all-night blackouts alone in her house, a 10-year-old, all these things in her life. And she was a young widow. My father died when I was young, and what she did with that, which I'm not going to tell you because that's a spoiler alert. But it's an easy read. It's a gift-size book. It's 160 pages, and it has 25 what I consider to be essential life lessons. And the main one being, and again, I'll spill a little bit here. The main one being, my mother believes there are no bad experiences, only the ones you don't learn from. And so it's a very uplifting. I mean, the early reviews that we've seen are wonderful, but it's an uplifting book. It's a great gift book. I have friends who are buying it for their mothers and their daughters, their 20-something, 30-something daughters. So because I've seen a lot of reviews now, I'm more emboldened. It's hard when you write a book. That's one of the scariest things I've ever done, I have to say, talking about getting out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
So I would love people to consider getting it. It's called My Mother Always Says, 25 Lessons for Finding the Silver Lining. It will be on Amazon. It'll be on barnesandnoble.com, et cetera. So would love to have people support us by buying the book and then sharing it.
Love it.
Read it and give it to someone. I'm more about the visibility, the more people seeing it, and not. It's really written. I think the true audience is your audience is midlife women. However, some of my friends' husbands have grabbed their iPad and read the book and love it, so that's good. And I think it has an audience with younger women too. A lot of our adult daughters are somewhat lost, these 20 and 30 somethings, because of so many things which we can't get into now. So I think there's value in it for just about anybody.
I love that. Congratulations to you both, because that is, not only your mom at her age putting out a book, kudos on that. You did it together, and that experience that you guys have together in doing that had to be great. Yeah.
I learned a lot about her. And I think she learned a lot about herself, which, again, I won't talk about the ending, but it's fascinating because she saw her own life through a different lens by doing it.
Was she always a positive person?
I don't think of her as particularly cheery, but I don't think of her as a complainer either. But it's when you look at the major life challenges, and she's just incredibly resilient.
Yeah.
Incredibly resilient. She was always able to bounce back and then maximize. And that's really the thread through the book is everything that happened to her actually affected everything that then happened to her and what she did with it. And I think it's very inspiring. If nothing else, it's interesting, historical, but it's also inspiring.
I love that. And it actually ties in and supports your thinking that, what we have inside of us, we're building on it from the very beginning, and we just keep building and keep building, right? And then become who we are through all of that. So, well, congratulations. And folks, go get a copy. Go get a copy. I'm so excited for you guys. And your event is in April. Yep. Tell us the dates.
Saturday, April 26th in Waltham. We're more than half sold now, so the tickets are going. But it's a great take. Saturday, April 26th in Waltham.
And we'll put the link in the show notes, guys, in case you can't write that down right now for whatever reason. We'll go ahead and get it. And where can people find you? Where's the best place to find you?
Well, my website is my name, so that makes it very easy. It's Amy Goober, GOOBER.com, and every single thing known to man that I do is on there. So the book is on there. The events are on there.
Awesome.
It's all on there.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining me today. This has been a great conversation. Continue doing the great work. I'm excited to be part of some of it.
I hope. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Message in the Middle with Marianne. If you enjoyed the podcast, please take a minute to share it and write a review as it helps bring new listeners to our audience. If you'd like to keep the conversation going between episodes, please join us at Facebook group Message in the Middle with Marianne.